What's going on, everyone? Here's the best and worst weapons Apex Legends Season 26 has to offer. Let's get right to it. Starting in D tier with those weapons which I deem to be underwhelming, we are only going to have one holding down this tier, and it is the charge rifle. The charge can be great if you do connect headshots at max range, but beyond this, it's kind of pointless to use the charge right now over something a little bit more practical like a 30-30 or a G7. The charge is going to have similar, if not even a little bit worse damage at times than the Sentinel sniper rifle, and that is way more traditional. The charge is terrible at close range. Basically, you do not have a secondary weapon when you are using the charge rifle, which is also a huge problem. And the charge for me is mostly like a troll weapon or maybe a damage farming gun. You can use it if you want to try to get insane knocks at mega long ranges where you can't even capitalize on that knock because they are too far away. But overall, I would look elsewhere at pretty much every other gun in the game if you are truly looking for a long range poking or damage farming weapon. Next up, we have the C tier, which has a set of weapons rocking my okay or fine ranking. The first marksman is here, and it is actually the Bocek compound bow. I know a few pro players actually like this thing, and I was a pretty big fan of the Bocek when it was in the care package 2+ seasons ago for all those years, but right now it does feel a little bit weird and hard to recommend. It's harder to use than other marksman options, and the total damage is less than a 30-30, at least when it does come to a 1-to-1 shot. The slower fire rate and the charge up does not make it as approachable as a G7. Even though I'm not a fan of the Bocek, I will acknowledge that it does still have the most unique feature out of pretty much any gun out there, where it can kind of be this silent shooter type thing, and it can be annoying to get hit by it. Ammo being capped as well in the weapon is a problem since arrows are not found on the ground when you do run out of the Bocek ammo. If you are not picking up your ammo as you are using the Bocek, and if you do not find a new Bocek, you will run out of ammo, and there's really nothing you can do. Ultimately, the KEK is not bad, there's just better options, but I also find that the Bocek is similar to the charge rifle, where it's not too great in the closer ranges, but at least you do have that alternate hip-fire mode if needed. Another weapon that is kind of exactly the same as the Bocek for me is going to be the longbow. Again, it's not bad, there's just better options. And you'll notice this is going to be the case for a lot of the weapons that are sub A tier or really sub S tier. One thing I do like about the longbow is that it can use sniper optics, which could be useful if you are trying to use it over something like a G7 or 30-30. However, I will also note that a lot of times you just don't need that extra range a sniper optic can bring you. It's just not really necessary. Additionally, though, the longbow can be a fair option if you are trying to split up ammo types from your squad. The longbow for me used to be one of my favorite weapons, and I still run it from time to time. It's just not as competitive in the meta right now as those G7s and the 30-30s and those type of weapons. I will state that I actually think the longbow is pretty good, if not sleeper good off the drop, as if you do get a headshot in the close to medium range, it can be deadly. I find that the longbow is pretty good with an iron sight and no attachments as well. Moving into B tier, we start to have a few weapons that are good or great and can have moments of brilliance, but mostly are still outclassed by similar things that are above it. Apex Legends' old favorite, the Havoc, starts us off in this tier, and at times, I actually think this gun can be rated a little higher, but for the most part, the Havoc right now feels a little bit tough to recommend. The mag size is the biggest issue for me. It feels almost unusable if you do not have a mag on it, or you at least have to be perfect with your shots. It's a shame, as the mag size to me used to be one of the best things going for it. The lack of a turbocharger, of course, also makes it a little bit harder to use, and no turbo with less mag size means it is harder to pre-fire a few shots, as you need really every shot to count. If you're pre-firing 2 or 3 bullets and they miss and then the enemy comes around the corner, you might miss out on actually getting that knock. Time to kill is still going to be really good though, so if you are really accurate with the Havoc, then it will do pretty well for you. Ultimately though, if you are going to want a mid-range AR, I would take the Nemesis, and if you want a close-range beamer, I would take a look at the Volt or the new Energy RE45. Next up is the OG of OGs, the Wingman. The Wingman is simply just not that competitive in the overall meta right now, as we are in a more long-range meta, which the Wingman simply just cannot really compete with. That being said, if you are playing wildcard, pubs, and if you do get the Wingman off the drop as your first weapon, even in ranked, then it is absolutely usable, and I would even say it is amazing at times. The Wingman is much like many other weapons, where it's decent to better than this in the early game, but it loses its luster pretty quickly. Of course, if you have a perfect shot and you don't miss a single shot with the Wingman, then it can be extremely viable. But if you miss basically one shot with the Wingman, then every weapon in the game is going to win out in the straight up TTK analysis. Another weapon I think has an edge off the drop is the Alternator. The Alternator for me has always been a really solid entry point SMG for those who want a feel of an SMG but struggle a little bit with controlling something like an R99, an RE45, maybe even a Prowler. The Alternator has a great base damage per mag, making it an excellent choice in the early game situations. And it's really not even that bad if you want to run it in something like Wildcard, where you need more damage per mag with the increased handling of an SMG as well. Ultimately, the alternator is going to falter in one-on-ones against a lot of other weapons, which does hold it back. I would love to see disruptor rounds come back on the alternator to make it a little bit more competitive, but if you want to really just turn your brain off and have no issues with recoil control, the alternator is definitely something that I think a lot of people do sleep on. Almost the inverse of the alternator is going to be the Prowler. There's no other gun out there that makes me rage more than a Prowler with no mag, but if you get a blue or purple magazine on the Prowler, it's actually almost unbeatable if you do need to take 1-on-2s or 1-on-3s. The time to kill isn't bad, but it's not going to be a handful of other weapons, but this is understandable as you are trading time to kill for the total damage per mag that you can do. The Prowler is not really usable at endgame in my eyes due to that slower TTK, but having the select fire hop up baked into the weapon now is quite nice for those that are not a fan of the burst mode, and I think many players actually might gravitate towards the Prowler as the season does go on. For ranked or hyper competitive situations though, I probably would avoid this gun, and for wildcard, it is an actual beast due to that big mag size. Our first shotgun is here, and it is the Mastiff. The Stiffy for me dropped a handful of placements over the previous seasons, mainly due to its competition, the EVA 8, the Mozambiques, and even the PK getting a little bit more viability. I still think the Mastiff is usable if you want or need the ability to reload one round at a time, which is useful in a multi-enemy or multi-team fight. It's hard to recommend the Mastiff right now as it really doesn't do anything like unique. The EVA is the straight up better fast killer, or the PK is going to be that better to swap to and one tap someone down. Almost edging itself into A tier, we have the L-Star, our first LMG. The L-Star is honestly pretty good, but it requires you to be at a very specific range to not get beat by a handful of other weapons. Too far and you will not get every shot on target due to its fairly substantial recoil. Too close and you'll be too slow to eliminate enemies with its less than ideal TTK when you are comparing it to something like an R99 or an RE45. I really like the L-Star in hubs or wildcard where I can be a little bit more free using that no reload feature, but when it comes to being really competitive in those hyper ranked, high tier ranked environments, I would still look elsewhere. And I'll also just mention, wow, does the L-Star use ammo like nothing else in the game? You need like 400 rounds or you are gonna run out. Rounding out the B tier is the second LMG, the Spitfire, and I bounce back and forth a ton between putting this thing in A tier or putting it in B tier, and honestly, you could go either way, and it really depends on the player, and that's honestly the case with most guns on this list. It's really just a baseline guide. If you are using a gun really to more effectiveness than other guns, the guns could be ranked higher for you. The time to kill for the Spitfire actually is not bad. The huge mag size can also make taking on a lot of enemies at once viable. LMGs and the Spitfire specifically had some small nerfs in that compactness with the hip fire. It did get widened a little bit, but I found this is pretty much just a non-issue. It's still very accurate in the hip fire sense. I love using the Spitfire in wildcard. It's like my go-to weapon in that mode where you truly need as large of a mag as you can get, but at the same time, you are not really sacrificing that much in that mid-range beam ability. As we move into A tier, remember that playing with randoms in Apex is kind of buns. Lucky for you, I have a dedicated Discord with over 17,000 members where you can find others to party up with or even ask me questions. Also, hit that like button. Thanks for the support. A tier for me is where we really start to get a lot of weapons that can be used at the top of the game, and even at times, I would consider meta if you and your squad are playing into these weapon strengths. The return to the nearest top of the game is the Mozambique Akimbos. Please note that I decided to skip ranking the single version of the gun this season as we don't have a P20 counterpart, and most of the time, you're just going straight to Akimbos with the Mozams anyway. The Mozam had a nice little buff of the fire rate as well as tightening the blast pattern, and while it isn't the hugest of differences, it's definitely noticeable. I don't think by any means will the Mozams be the long-term like primary secondary weapon that you're going to use over something like a PK or an EVA, but if you want an alternate secondary with honestly a really amazing total damage per mag that you can kind of just main straight into fights and not have to worry about swapping to, then these little shotguns can definitely be excellent. I think a lot of people are sleeping on them. I would give them a try if you haven't yet. Next, we have the Sentinel Sniper Rifle. This is what I would say is Apex Legends' first true viable long-range weapon. The Sentinel is actually unbelievable off the drop, as if you get this thing, you charge it up, you're gonna one-shot headshot anyone at this stage of the game. Late game, it's still great, and it has the power to slow enemies down, as a clean body shot means they gotta use a bat, and a headshot means they gotta use a bat and a med kit or a Phoenix kit. I would argue that the Sentinel lacks real usability to poke and apply regular pressure, which is why it isn't higher than the soft A placement that I have it, but if you want to snipe and you want that bolt action, that quick scoping feel, this in my eyes is Apex's premier ground loot sniper. The original burst assault rifle, the Hemlock also locks in a nice A placement. Simply put, the Hemi is not as competitive as a Nemesis, and thus it's a little bit lower because of it. If you want more flexible close and mid-range bursting and even a long-range tap firing option, then the Hemlock I actually do think is a little bit better than the Nemesis because of that single shot tap firing capability. But if you are using the single shot tap firing capability a lot, you might as well just use something like a Rampage or a 30-30. I think the Hemlock can work as a competitive option if you have a lot of teammates using energy ammo due to the Nemesis, the Volt, and the RE45. A lot of players are really using all these guns, and if this is the case, then looking at the Hemlock is a pretty fair option for you to use. Oddly enough, I would consider the Rampage to be in a pretty great spot these days, and it in some ways plays out similar to the Hemlock, where it's very viable as an all-around gun that works at every range. It's not bad at close range as long as you do have thermites, which can be an issue to itself because you may not want to carry that many of them solely just to make your gun better, but having at least one of these makes you have more play options so you can burst through doorways, or if you are getting pushed, you can throw that thermite in there, and really the TTK becomes honestly quite competitive with a lot of close range weapons. You don't really need any attachments on the Rampage, which is also nice and arguably has the best iron sights in the game. I would use the Rampage if you want something with a little hybrid flexibility, you want to farm damage, and maybe you just want a spray weapon and not something like a 30-30 repeater. Since we are in a long range meta, the next gun, which I typically rate in a low S tier or high A, is going to be the Flatline, solidly in the A tier for me. While I think the Flatline falls a little bit in ranked, it's still a very good option in pubs or wildcard where you need that close range to medium range flexibility. It's probably the best spray assault rifle these days if you are not a fan of burst guns, I will say. It's not easy to use, but if you can master the recoil, it is very good. It's just not going to win out against something like a 30-30 in a mid-range fight, which pretty much everyone is using these days, which does mean that the Flatline can be a little bit difficult depending on the engagement that you are in. Season 24 and Season 25's most used weapon, the Devotion, is up next, and yes, the Devo does fall down a peg or two as it had a couple nerfs, but that being said, the Devo is still nuts and I would argue is being slept on. As for the nerfs, if you aren't aware, again, the hipfire spread compactness was nerfed, much like the Spitfire, and the recoil was increased a little bit, and the mag size was reduced as well. And all that being said, I feel like the Devo is basically the same in terms of usefulness. It's not going to necessarily be hyper competitive against an R9 or an RE45, but once this thing is spinning up, if you got a lot of enemies near you, it's pretty much broken. It's going to be a great thing to have. At the end of the day, though, it comes down to play style, and I would say that the Devotion is a little bit better if you're playing more reserved, where you are getting pushed rather than doing the advancements on enemies yourself, where you might want more mobility with something like an RE45 or an R99. Another energy gun, the Volt SMG, also gets a pretty close to S tier rating. I would argue that this is one of the SMGs that the majority of players are sleeping on right now. No real changes in a long while now, but the nerf to a few other close range weapons, in my eyes at least, does give the Volt a little bit of an opening to be used. The biggest issue with the Volt is recommending it over an RE45, which honestly is just better in the close range, and I think a Nemesis is going to give you a lot more usability at all ranges if you are looking to actually main the gun. If you want an easy SMG experience, then I think the Volt is still a good choice. It's like a step up between the Alternator, but a step down from the R99 in terms of how easy it is to control. So I would look at this if you are looking for a run and gun experience, but maybe it isn't going to be the most competitive weapon out there. Pretty much in the same vein as Volt, we also have the Car SMG getting a high A placement, but is edged out by its light ammo counterpart, the R99. I would use the Car if you need ammo flexibility, or if you do find the Car off the drop in a heavy mag early on. It's a no-brainer, and it is a very competitive option, and you really don't have to worry about it too much. I mostly think the argument between the R99 or the Car comes down to personal preference, and you really can't go wrong with either. Just know that the R9 is going to statistically be a little bit better in the straight-up TTK aspect. Not necessarily a better option than a few of the close-range weapons in A tier, but the EVA 8 is pretty much back as an option again. The damage was buffed, and the fire rate was nerfed, making it hitting those 7s over and over and over again also much more sweet. But in all seriousness, if you are accurate with this thing, it can shred, and I think it's very useful if you are not an SMG fan and you want something to team fight with. If you break down the numbers, the time to kill is actually very close to an R99, which I think a lot of people are sleeping on. But a big hint to the future of this video, the Peacekeeper is better, so take that as you will if you really feel compelled to use a shotgun right now. Our final A tier weapon, and almost breaking into S, is going to be the R301 carbine. While I think competitively the Flatline might be a little bit better, I can't argue against just how easy the R301 is to use even to this day. It's been a while since the days of R301 Legends, weapons. It is Apex Legends' most traditional weapon, and I would say that it's the gun for anyone looking to actually improve their recoil control and their skill in Apex and see some noticeable results in-game. It's an easy pickup and plus for me as the engagements are closer, and it's harder to recommend in rank due to the poking meta we are in again. Either way, you really can't go wrong with it. I find that using the unlimited ammo amp can be hugely helpful, so you don't have to worry about running out of ammo, and you can't just spray at enemies all game long. All right, here we are, S tier, the weapons that I think are truly meta in Apex Legends and honestly can be used at any skill level or any mode, aka pubs, wildcard, or ranked Apex Legends. Starting off this tier, I am putting all Apex Legends care package weapons right at the bottom of S tier, the Triple Take, Kraber, and the P2020 Akimbo. Let's start with the oldest care package weapon, the Kraber. For the most part, since the Kraber headshot has returned to be 210 damage, I think it's a solid S tier weapon and an easy pickup. You still gotta be aware of running out of ammo near end game, but it's the weapon that you really want to have to open engagements or even farm a nice free 1000 damage if you can't hit like 50 to 60% of your shots. The Triple Take in some ways I think is a little bit better than the Kraber actually in terms of its reliable long-term use in the game. Ammo is not really an issue like it is with Kraber, and you can apply more pressure getting partial hits on enemies. The Triple Take I find works fairly well as a close range option in a pinch. It is like a mini EVA 8, and since it is a care package weapon and it doesn't really need me to say this, but it is the best marksman hands down and an auto pickup if you are using a 30-30 or a G7 Scout. And the final care package gun is going to be the P2020 Akimbos. This thing is probably an S plus tier weapon because it is basically the best gun in the game, but it does feel kind of hard to come by right now. The P20 Akimbos right now in the care package, they are stupid accurate, stupid strong, and having that sliding to reload just increases your total damage output if you are in a multi-enemy fight. It's an automatic pickup every time to replace your close range RE45 or that R99. Before we continue, I do want to mention that I now have a creator code that you can use in the online Apex Legends store. Use my code, which is just TimPro. All you have to do is go to this website on screen, click the item you are purchasing, which can be Apex coins or even the Battle Pass, and then enter my code TimPro at checkout. Thank you so much for those who have already used my code, and thank you for the support. One of the best secondaries that you can pick up on the ground right now is surprisingly the Peacekeeper shotgun. Even though the PK came out of the care package and is arguably worse now, the PK in terms of accessibility and damage output is basically busted and honestly just broken. I think being maybe even slept on by a lot of players. There's no better gun to swap to and tap someone down to finish them off if you couldn't get that knock on your initial spray. It's fairly easy to use between the accuracy it can provide at significant ranges, which I think is also being slept on. I sound like a broken record at this point, to even that hip fire at close range if you can't get that almost 110 damage full hit. Shotties aren't for everyone, but I would encourage you to use this thing. SMG with a PK is one of my favorite pub and wildcard combos. It just absolutely melts enemies. The PK secondary and ranked is also awesome to conserve ammo, giving you the option to load up on extra heals, grenades, or other resource items. If you are looking for the best mid to close range beamer, it is going to be the Nemesis assault rifle. While it's not fully auto, you can hold down the trigger and more or less it makes it perform similar to any spray weapon. The Nemesis is great in the close range hip fire. One burst to the chest at medium range is also absolutely nuts. If you do connect a headshot or two in there with your burst, you're most likely going to come out on top to eliminate that enemy. Haven't really spoken about it yet, but energy ammo is probably the only drawback, is you can't hold as much, and tons of people are running energy ammo weapons these days, which could be good or bad. Good, you can find in death boxes. Bad, everyone else is going to be hogging the ammo. If you have two teammates running long range weaponry like a G7 or a 30-30, then it's an easy decision to run the Nemesis and be that one teammate that does get the knocks if enemies do push in to be a little bit closer. I decided that this season we are going to have an S plus tier section, as I think there's a handful of weapons that are simply just overperforming or are noticeably way more usable due to how things are playing in ranked Apex specifically right now. Mainly this being the dropship, placement rewards, and KP changes, making the game slower and more filled with enemies. And because of this, one of these weapons that is being used a lot more is going to be the G7 Scout. The Scout, in my eyes, is pretty much the weapon to use for anyone that wants the easiest damage farming experience that they can get. The downside compared to 30-30 is going to be you're not going to have that same one-tap potential of a charged up 30 shot, but the spray ability is a huge thing I think a lot of players are going to like. The Scout is going to also be better in close range in my eyes. No attachments are really needed on the G7 besides an optic, which I find the G7 without an optic to be absolutely terrible for some reason. And the G7 is going to be great at any point of a game, and it's something that you are going to run into all the time. A lot of players are using this right now. And the companion to the G7 is up next, the 30-30 repeater. I do think the 30-30 repeater takes a more skilled player, as it's harder to use and maybe a little less consistent, but it has the ability to do 120 plus damage headshots, making it more lethal to open a fight. The slower shooting nature of the 30-30 I find lets your ammo last a little bit longer, even though you can't stack as much ammo as light ammo. The skull piercer hop up just being baked into the weapon now I think is an auto boost to the gun's effectiveness. The 30-30 repeater is not as good at close range, but I think that long range upside is definitely going to make it worth it, and you probably already have that close range alternative that is made for enemies who are pushing in. The single shot reload feature of the 30-30 is also rather useful if you do need to reload 1 or 2 shots to shoot and finish off an enemy instead of reloading an entire mag, which the G7 does have to do and the 30 does not. This for me is going to be my #1 recommendation for damage farming and pressure applying. You can't go wrong with this weapon. The straight up best weapon in the game right now for the pure time to kill aspect is the R99. The RE45 is also incredible, but the RE45 does ever so slightly lose out to the pure TTK aspect of the R99, and we will get to this in a moment. There's not a lot to say about the R99 these days. It's Apex's OG SMG. It did take a backseat for a couple years, and over the last couple seasons, it has been very good. No better weapon to one mag someone down at blazing fast speeds. Light ammo is good, and due to that mag changes a while back, getting a one mag with this SMG with no light mag is definitely way more feasible than it used to be. However, in speaking of easy one mags on enemies, the new energized and elite RE45 has this beat hands down. There's a lot to unpack here, but first, the time to kill is incredible, but not as good as the R9, but is very close though. Much like when the Havoc was OP, it does require some pre-firing and a great sense of timing to make the most of it. If you include the charge up time in your calculation for TTK, which you don't really want to do because that's not how it's calculated, then of course the RE45 is a lot slower than the R99. The big thing though that most people do not realize is that you do get similar R99 performance, but you're going to have that movement and handling of a pistol that makes you much more elusive than an SMG user, or if you are using something like a shotgun or a Spitfire or a Devotion in close range. And of course, the total damage per mag of the RE45 is something like almost double that of an R9, making it extremely forgiving to one mag someone down at any point in the game and with any mag size. I love this new energized version, and while Apex states it's only going to be around for a season, I can see it staying a little bit longer, but time will tell. And I would argue that it gives you the best competitive edge in a purely ranked environment where you are getting those end games packed with enemies and you need that extra damage per mag to get your enemies down. Check out my legend ranking video on screen for more on Apex's meta. Slam that like button and don't forget to use code TimPro in that item shop. I appreciate it. But till next time, everyone, happy gaming, legends.